good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Here. Or some of you, it's evening. My name's Mike Ryan, and I'm here to, lead the conversation with Jake Martin and Dehne Vinnicombe this morning. Just to give you a bit of background on myself, I'm the owner of Eagle Direct, and my journey started in 2007, where I was involved in selling steel for cattle housing in Ireland. At the time, there was a European grant going, and there was 80% rebates for cattle housing. And what we learned in that process was there was very little plan. There was very little talk on whether it was good for the animal, and there was no future plan. And that I'm excited about. The guys we're talking with today have gone the opposite. They've got a great plan. A great focus on the animal, and really looking at that health by design is what we call it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it over to Jake Martin, who's been working in the Australian market since 1995, designing barns all over the world. Jake's been a great resource for the producers he's worked with, and I've noticed that the producers he works with just keep coming back to Jake over and over again. So that just is a testament of how he's leading these projects through. And we've also got Dehne Vinnicombe, who's a fourth generation dairy farmer in Northern Victoria, who's also joining us. Dean's just gone through that process of, right, what I want to change. I want to go into a house system, and just talking through that process of where he started and where he is now, where he's got cows actually in barns and having some really great early results. So if you've seen the video of Dehne, Jake's going to present to us. After Jake presents, I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you've got any questions that are out there, we'd really love for you to put them in the Q&A section, which is down the bottom. Just send them through, and then after Jake has finished his presentation, I'll open it up for people, and you can come and ask the question yourself if you're comfortable to do that. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Jake Martin from JGM Design to start to lead the conversation. Thanks, Jake.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Good morning to everybody if you're in Australia, and good evening if you're not. Mike, thanks for putting this together. This has been, I know it's been a bit of work that you and your team put together. So this is really good, and I appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this and to present some of the things that we've done here. I'm especially happy to be with my buddy Dehne. He and I have worked together now for 2.5 years on his project. It was a slog there for a while, but he's got a really nice dairy, and we're real proud to have been involved with it. Dehne's a great guy, and he's a good dairyman, and so we're happy to be in. We're happy to see stuff like that when we put designs together and for a guy to carry it out. So, good on you, buddy. We've got what I'd like to do is I'll go through some of the stuff that on master planning, total design on these facilities, and then similar to what Dehne and I worked on for his farm, and then we'll get involved in some of the things for into the barn particulars. We're a little short on time, so I'm going to have to run pretty fast. So if I'm talking too fast and talking like a yank, just tell me to slow down, and I'll do that. I have some initial thoughts I'd like to share with you, and the guys who know me have heard all this before, but you've got to. My main recommendation is to go out and visit as many successful dairy farms as you can, and if you can't do it locally, and you go someplace else. I know that COVID's been a pain in the butt, but get out there and visit farms. When Dehne was doing his, he didn't have as many opportunities because there weren't as many farms. Now that he's up and Jay Climo's up and a lot of other guys are up, it's more things for you guys to see out there. But just go out and visit before you decide to do anything. As we go through these barns, one of the main things we look at is cow comfort. Gordy Jones, a buddy of mine, he travels all over the world as well. And his big thing is milk is absence of stress. We're trying to bring animals into buildings, trying to take the stress away from them, from cooling and from comfort and from shade, and just trying to get them to be happy campers to do what they need to do. putting animals in barns, which is what we're going to be talking about, is a different management philosophy, obviously, from what you're doing right now. If you don't agree with this management philosophy, don't even bother. This is a different animal from what you guys are working with right now. My saying over the years has been, I've seen good facilities fail and I've seen bad ones succeed. Good management, proper management is what it really takes to make one of these things happen. You can spend as much money as you want to on a farm, but if you can't manage it right, it's still going to fail. And finally, was just, no one can guarantee 40% milk production. Maybe others on this panel might be able to, but as of this point in time, I think we're talking about these barns are going to have to pay for themselves, obviously, but nobody in here is going to guarantee a specific amount of milk production increase based on a facility. So the next question comes in from from a barn standpoint, is that should I house my cattle or continue going the way that I'm doing right now? So my main question will be, do you have a problem that a barn can handle? First step in problem solving is problem definition. So is there a problem? You had a rough winter? You're walking your cows 3 kilometers in order to get back and forth to the dairy. I mean, you got your animals in the hot weather, just leave the dairy and go right out into the trees and don't eat. I mean, those are things that come up on a regular basis. Barn will solve some of these problems. Unfortunately, it's going to create some others that you don't have. So it's a net positive, and only you can figure that out. But it's going to be, and that's where it comes into visiting with these other guys. Go to Dean's farm. Go to Quentin's farm, go to farms throughout the country that you can go to and talk to managers who are doing it and doing it well. We're going to upgrade to cow housing. You're going from your sleeping bag out in the middle of nowhere to the Hyatt Regency at a significant cost per stall per cow. At some point in time, this cow's going to move into the Hyatt. She better have a damn good way of paying her own freight. In order to do that, it's going to be higher milk production. It's going to be higher fertility rate. It's going to be better feed efficiency. There's a host of things that could happen in there. But as we're going through that, you've got to come up with those kind of things as you're moving forward. I can't give you those numbers, but Dean can give you the numbers that he has. You can get the other guys that are out there can give you the numbers that they have. But at some point in time, you still got to pull through those things and work with your bankers in order to get to a point where you're comfortable about what these barns are going to do for you. Before I get into the Australian models that we've been looking at, I just wanted to take a quick look at, this is a typical barn, this one here in Florida that we did in the last few years. This is a 3,200 cow dairy. This is a milking parlor. These are housing barns for milking cows. This special needs barn with dry cows and maternities and things like that. Older heifers, breeding bred heifers, weaned calves and baby calves. 3,200 cows, 3,000 young stock. You get 7,000 animals when you include dries on this farm, and they're all concentrated in this one little place right here. This is what this guy wanted. This is how he wanted to manage his dairy. In addition to that, we got a feed center, which goes off the chart here. And we got a manure system, which goes off the slide here. But for the farm itself, this is most of the farm other than the property that they have for growing forages. So what I'd like to, so I'll start with this, some of the recent renovation projects that we've been doing in Australia, kind of show you some of the things that we've done, and then go into the barns themselves. This first slide in here is a facility we're currently working with. These guys are milking 2,000 cows in grazing type operation. You can see these typical tracks that you guys are all familiar with. Animals coming into it, going to the dairy. There's the parlor itself. This is an open holding pen, which nobody else on earth does, but the Kiwis and Australia for some reason or another. So now so cows are out in the open right there. We go through here and say that we want to house 2,000 cows. So this is right now for the phase one. So this is 2 1,000 cow freestall barns. He just wanted to go freestall barns as opposed to a bedded pack barn. So right now this is 2 barns laid out with a hospital facility out in the front, travel lane going into this existing dairy. they figure that this dairy can handle this much plus a bit more. We've got some and wants to use sand bedding, so we went through a sand settling lane here, and then a manure screen separator, settling pond, and waste storage pond. His existing ponds are right here. Wanted to kick around the idea of maybe using them. So we've got several options that are available for him to think about. As we get further into this and we start saying, okay, this land seems to work right, the wind seems to be right, the slopes seem to be right, we can kind of work around these things. How do we phase it later on? He's got 2,000 cows now. This houses 2,000 cows, so he's done, right? At this point, he wants to make sure that in the later years, if he wants 6 months from now or 6 years from now, decides to go further, then we can do that. And it doesn't have space that he's taken up where barns would be. So the red is phase 2, and this purple here is phase 3. And so you go on up and you're going up to 3,000 milking cows, but in addition, you've got all dry cows. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups of milking cows here, 6 at 500, you get 3,000 cows, plus all your dry stock. You get close-up heifers, things like that. A new dairy here at some point in time when this one's out. Phase 1 is that the first 2 barns. Phase 2 would be this first freestall. And at that point, he's maxed out the existing dairy. And then phase 3, he's got this last barn. And then same thing with the manure system that you can go back through and continue to add to. So those are things that as you go through it, and we've got a plan for the future on this farm. This might take 3 years to put in fruition. It might take 10. But we know where everything is going to be, and we've already figured out how to calculate or figured out where things need to be. There's another farm that we got involved with back in about 7 years ago when we first started playing around with it. This is a feed. This is a feed face right here with a shade structure, and then they have cattle out in other parts of the farm that are coming into the dairy itself. So here's a dairy and a holding pen that's right into here. So he wanted to look into getting to the next phase of this project. So this is current, where we actually were going to put a feed face here, and he decided to put a freestall barn. So this is 1,000 cows right here, with Main Street going to the existing dairy. Sand lane because he's bedding with sand in this freestall barn. You'll see right there, there's 1, 2, 3 more barns. Each of those are 1,000 cows apiece. These may or may not be constructed. If he builds each one of these is going to get him up to increase the cow numbers in this facility by another 1,000 cows, or at least the cows in barns. So again, we've got it laid out where this thing is going to go, where potentially a dairy is going to go, where the manure system is going to go, feed centers down here. Laid out each of these components throughout the system, where he's got a map of how this facility would take place and what the next steps would be. These guys here, again, I think we've been working with them since 2013. And so they've got a same thing. He was looking at seeing just what was going to happen here. This is the dairy right here, open back in. This was a feed face down and through any shades on either side, plus access to pasture. In this case, he actually went back in. We laid out barns for him, and he put in a feed pad here with some manure, some manure storage ponds here. He continued to use this lots out in here, and then had the feed face as well, either to go to the lots or to pastures. But this was phase 1 that he's already implemented. Phase 2, which we just finished design on, is to put a freestall barn on top of that feed pad. So now he's got a freestall barn with 1,000 cows on it going into this parlor. He's got a new feed center going in, a new sand lane coming in there that's going to take sand out of here. And then then he starts looking at what the next step is, which then it goes into 1, 2, or 3 more barns. But we started with this layout before he did this feed pad. That feed pad was actually isn't something that he just threw down there. That feed pad was part of this plan. So these guys knew what they wanted to do over a period of time, and then had us stick stuff in there to make it happen. So again, master plan. It's where everything is supposed to be and where it's going. This would be the future dairy if it ever got put in. If he did, I think he has enough room for one more barn. Once he gets to barn number 3, he'll have to put another parlor in there. This is a facility that we finished the design on. They're trying to get started on construction. This is the dairy right here. All the tracks going back and forth to grazing pastures that you guys are all familiar with, manure storage ponds. Again, this is going from try to go to a 2,000 expandable to 3,000 cows. These are 1,000 cow barns right in here. And in reality, this plan looks just like this. If you were going to milk 1,500 cows as opposed to 3,000, the barns get shorter. But I mean, the general idea is still the same, is to look at what's going to happen on all of these buildings, where each of them are going to go, and where this thing is going to end up. And that's what this is right here. So again, a sand lane because it's sand bedded freestalls, screen separator, wastewater storage pond, or solid storage ponds here, settling basins, and a wastewater storage pond here. So again, he knows what's going to happen or what's going to come down a pike. He's not going to build anything here. He's not going to build anything here, leaving himself open. This is Deane's facility. When he and his dad first got started and brought us on board to look at some things. There's a dairy right there, open holding pen back here. He's got some wastewater storage in these ponds right in there, and then he's got grazing pastures up in this direction down over here. So they wanted us to go back in and look at how to expand this facility. So this is Deane's current barn. It's a 750 cow barn. It's got a nice hospital area in the front, right up in here for hospital cows as well as maternities. Continuing to use, we've got a walkway in here, continuing to use this existing dairy. We've got room for more barns here. So again, whether they come in or not that's Deane's going to make that decision here in the near future. But we've got room for it, and we know we're not to build things. Same thing with the dairy, the future dairy. This will be a travel lane right over in here. The manure system was set up to where it was scalable, so you could put in what he needed for today, and then you could add later on. So that's all there. Manure system is a little bit different here. This is not a sand bit barn. This is going to be a manure solids green bedding type system. So he's got a little bit difference. He's generating and making his own green bedding and putting it back into the barn, which is cool. So that whole system is set up to be expandable to work for the ultimate size of this facility. So that's just giving some ideas about some of the projects that we've worked on. These are recent projects. These are just things that we've just been finishing up in Australia. A few notes on master planning before we bump over to barns. Each of the barns that you guys are looking at have got to be based on the climate that you're in. So most of the stuff.
Just a quick question, Jake. Just you talked about numbers there. Is there minimum numbers that you look at with these sort of facilities? Just before you go on to the next point.
What do you mean, minimum numbers to start with? Minimum numbers to go to?
I guess you're looking at 1,000 cow barns there. Is there barn sizes? Can you change barn sizes accordingly?
These barns just so happen to be the ones that we were looking at were 1,000 cows. Those are 500 cow groups or so. But yeah, you can look at 300 cow groups, 400 cow groups, 500 cow groups, 200 cow groups. I mean, one of the things that you look at on these barns is that and I'll get into this in a minute, would be group sizes and what your parlor capacity is. So if you got a parlor that, right now, a lot of guys in Australia just milk the entire mob all at one time. And then cows are in a holding pen as long as they're in there. So hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. Once you get into barns, you can't afford to do that. If you're going to try to get your maximized milk production, these cows have got to get in and come out. You spend a lot of money on this barn. And you want the cows to spend as much time as they can inside the barn. So, which means you got to. So if your parlor is only going to can generate 300 cows an hour, then maybe your group size needs to be around 300 cows an hour or less. Because if you're milking 2x, then you could get by with a little bit larger than that. Some guys are taking longer to milk cows, knowing full well that this is a temporary situation until they get another dairy in there, and then they could bring it back to where they need to. So that goes into the calculus. But yeah, you don't have to have 500 cow groups or 1,000 cow barns. Nathan Shannon's is one of the barns that we showed a minute ago. That's a 1,000 cow barn, but he's actually got 4 groups of cows in there. So it's not 500 cow groups. It's smaller than that. I think people need to realize that the cost per cow changes as the barn size goes down. So it's a 1,000 cow barn on a per stall basis is not the same as a 200 cow barn on a per stall basis, because there's some things like flush components and electrical systems and things like that that go into it that make it less efficient as you go smaller. So that doesn't mean you have to have a 1,000 cow barn, but it does mean that there's a range. Did that answer your question?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So most of the barns that we're in here are in northern Vic, southern New South Wales. I mean, similar climates. Once you get into the coastal areas, it's going to be different. It's going to be higher. It's going to be higher rainfall, higher humidity. It's going to be closer to the coast. If you get out into to Perth, it's a little bit different. If you're going up into northern Australia, getting into different climates. So the main thing is you got to take a look and see what's going on with climate before you just jump into a barn. Wow, man, Dean did it. I can go do it over here. But that's not necessarily the case. Working with a site is important if you can. A lot of stuff that we've been doing has been on really flat sites. So we have to make all of our slopes, but as much as possible, kind of working with wind directions and barn slopes and proximity to parlors and feed and things like that is important. The future proof in the farms, which we showed in each of those little examples I just went through. The old adage that we go through, these 3 sure things in life is death, taxes, and dairies expand, because it just seems like dairies always get bigger. No matter how big they are, they seem to get bigger. In this case, do we leave enough room to double or triple in size? We just got to leave enough room, look into your crystal ball and make sure that you've got enough room to do something in the future. This is coming up more than anything else in these last few projects that we've worked on as potential problems or issues with environment and neighbors. People see dairies in Australia and think dairies in Australia and New Zealand, and they think of these black and whites and this beautiful green grass. You start putting cows in barns and things can change. That doesn't mean they're going to, but that does mean that some people take a negative effect on it. And it only takes one person in your area. Trust me, we know. It only takes one guy in your area to screw this whole thing up. And so it's just got to be careful. That doesn't mean you don't do it, but it does mean that you got to be careful on how you're working it out. People smell with their eyes. It sounds stupid, but if something looks like it's supposed to stink, it's going to stink. And some people get when they start looking at larger waste storage ponds and looking at barns and looking at cows being concentrated. So we just got to be careful and do a better job. I think as an industry, you guys need to make sure you're doing a better job at saying, hey, these cows are happy and these barns are good. You need to get professional help. There are guys out there right now in Australia who are damn good at what they do. That can help you with working on these environmental permits and we're going through the whole thing of these nutrient management plans. You got to make sure you're getting these guys involved and they understand what it takes to get things through council, as well as to help with neighbors and things like that. Don't underestimate this. In fact, I think in some ways this might be the first step. Okay, let's get into the housing barn types. I'm covering a lot of ground in a short period of time. Sorry. For the most part, we're looking at freestalls, looking at bedded pack, compost, barns, open lot systems, and pasture-based systems. I'm sure as hell not going to talk about pasture-based systems because I don't know anything about it. You guys do. Open lot systems, there's 2 that I know of that we've worked with in Australia, and it's very, very limited to some certain places in Australia. So I'm not gonna touch base with those right now. We'll concentrate on freestalls and bedded pack. Freestall barn, when I get involved in these projects, when I got involved with Dehne in the project from the very beginning, start asking questions about how many cows that you're milking and what your group sizes are, what I just mentioned, right? So the same thing about, we're trying to keep it down. The cows aren't away from the parlor any longer than they have to. You spend a lot of money on this building. You like them to use it. Again, with my little example about how much cow throughput and on cows per hour and size of groups and things like that. Those are things that we can work with as you go through the system. Freestalls themselves, we talk about 4 and 6 row barns. For those of you who aren't familiar with that terminology, a 4-row freestall barn, this is the barn itself. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 freestall groups. So this is a group of cows and 2 stalls, group of cows, 2 stalls. That's considered a 4-row barn. It's two sides. A 6-row barn is similar, where it's got 1, 2, 3 rows of freestall on one side, 3 rows of freestalls on the other. That's a 6-row barn. So that's the terminology that we use. And that's what you usually break up the system as you split it up. Say, I want to put a freestall barn in. Do you want 4 or 6-row barns? We'll talk about whys in a second. Other basic freestall design questions that we're going into is access to cows to the outside. We go into this on a number of times. Guys were asking about putting cattle on the outside of their barns, or should we have access to the outside of the barn? Some of our processors require us to. The last time I did this in Australia was in 1995. For Quentin's dad, Paul Moxie, and for Ron Parrish. Since then, we haven't, for the most part of these freestall barns, we haven't done this. You get muddy lots, you get dirty lots, you get cows going outside, all the hoo-ha that goes along with that. If you leave gates open, cows like to go outside better than they like to go inside. I screwed the barn up. We need to get this barn correct. We need to have water, we need feed, we need to have it's got to be a Hyatt Regency, man. We just want these cows to be happy. But for the most part, guys are not doing that. And it increases the size of the facility, the spacing between the barns and things. In a lot of ways, it's more about people than animals, and you might not agree with me and tell me to go jump, but that's the way I've seen. Finally, in the barn design, there's a manure management element that we need to think about in order to finalize the barn design. Scrape, flush, vacuum, right? So some kind of way to just get manure off the floors. Each of these have pros and cons that we're not going to get into right now. That's a flush system. Everybody's familiar with that. Scrape system. Everybody's familiar with that. The differences on these these barns like this right now, if you're grazing cattle and you're not using a feed pad, you're only collecting about 10 or 12% of the manure that you produce on a daily basis. When you get into a freestall barn type application, you get 100% of the manure that you're producing. So you got right off the bat, you've got an 8-fold factor of manure that you're collecting. In addition to that, if you're putting them in these barns and feeding them more and they're producing more, they're going to produce more manure, which means that now you're going to go to 10 or 12 times the amount of manure. So you think you got a problem with wastewater and manure right now, this is going to change things. That's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. So once we get an idea of what these barns are the initial thought processes on a freestall barn, we start looking at how we're going to ventilate them. Natural ventilation, tunnel ventilation, cross ventilation. Right off the bat, in Australia, I haven't seen any place that cross ventilation seems to make sense to me, at least yet. So natural ventilation, tunnel ventilator, sort of what we're going to. You got a copy of this. We're not going to go into all the words right now. You'll get a copy of this to be able to play with. A tunnel ventilated barn is just that. It's a tunnel where there's a side walls, there's end walls, a relatively low roof, and air is blown out one end of the barn, sucked in one end, blown out the other. A natural ventilated barn, it still has fans, but the barn is open on the sides, open at the top. That's our terminology. We use these barns throughout the world. This projects we've done, USA, Turkey, Spain, China, Australia, we can name a bunch more. So these same similar barns we're doing everywhere. This is a 6-row barn. This is a 4-row barn. Big issues that you look at right off the bat. are the size and length of these buildings. So the barns longer. This 4-row barn is longer, but it's got the feed face correct. So 4-row barn's got 72 centimeters per cow, which means that every cow in the group can feed at this feed face at one time. This is especially important if you're using headlocks to do your herd management. So if you get cattle in there and you want to do vaccinations, you want to do preg check, you want to do everything all the horrible things you guys do to cows, you can have it done right there at your feed base. 6-row barn's too short, and so you can't get all the cows in it at one time. So then that creates its own set of problems. So yeah, if you're not going to be managing cattle inside the barn, it may not matter. In a 4-row arrangement, we're talking 10 or 11 square meters per cow in the barn, 6 rows, 8. That 6-row barn's 38% smaller than a 4-row barn. So in the US, the factor is about 20% difference in the cost of building. So 6-row barn in the US wise is about 20% less expensive. A lot of guys are going that direction, A, because they want to manage cows in parlor, B, because they can get more of their money to do other things with other than build barns with it. There's pros and cons to each. Dean's barn was a 6-row barn. He went in that direction. That's a good conversation to have with him. But that's the difference between the two structures. All the stuff that we've done in Moxie here lately has been 6-row barns. Cross sections of both of those, you can see that's a 4-row barn. That's a 6 that we looked at a while ago. This is a 6-row, kind of a hybrid that we've done several of. We've done several for the Kambuna farm for Moxies. We've done several here in Australia, and they look like guys are just getting a little bit happier with them. There are 6 rows in here in the middle as opposed to the outside. The big difference in this barn is that it's got outside feed lanes, right? So, which can be a good thing. This is a 40.4 meter wide building. This is 36. So you've got another 4 or 5 meters of building width that you're paying for here. And there's some positives and there's some negatives on it. So, but it's an interesting layout. The big issue with these outside feed lanes is that most of the shed manufacturers in Australia use these truss frame buildings. And because of that, this truss frame right here can get pretty thick. The wider the building, the thicker the truss. We've got to size this building to make sure at the bottom of this truss is higher than your tallest truck or tallest feed wagon. So, and some of the guys with the bigger farms, they have bigger wagons, so they'll go 35 or 40 cubic meter boxes in there. These things get quite high, so 4.5 meters. So you got to make sure that you're staying the hell out of the way with this thing. So, something to consider as you go along the lines of this building. This is a typical shot of a 4-row freestall barn with cows on laid out pretty well. This is a 4-row with an outside lane. So typical 4-row barns you guys have seen. 6-row freestall barn with an outside row of freestalls here. This is a brand new building that we just did. That's, again, same thing. Head-to-head freestall group on the outside. So a lot of these guys are going in with these 6-row freestall barns. What I mentioned a while ago about the feed face, this is a headlocks in a 4-row freestall barn, 72 centimeters per cow. This is a 6-row barn with a feed rail. Cattle are in that at 46 centimeters per cow. There's not enough room for all the cows to eat at one time. It changes your feed management a little bit. And again, that's something you could talk to Dean about making sure you get feed pushed up on a regular basis. Make sure that you strategize a little bit different than what you do on a 4-row configuration. So for natural ventilation related barns that we were just talking about, the things that we look at, again, you'll be able to look at this on a handout. 3-to-1 roof slope, which is 33%, which is 18 degrees. Not any flatter than that. They get some manufacturers in Australia right now that are selling curved roofs. So they're best things in zip pockets. Knock yourself out if you want to go that way. Don't pay any more for it. It's a shade. It's on top of the cows. So if it costs the same as the other barns, great. If it's not, it's a different calculus. Building orientation, east and west. If you look at Dean's barns, they're east and west. We try to make sure from a shade angle standpoint, it really screws you up to go anything else outside of that with a naturally ventilated barn. Continuous open ridge vent, sized correctly, potentially put a cap on top of it. Eave heights vary on these barns to make sure that you got them right. As the 6-year-old barns need to be taller than the 4-year-old barns because there's a higher concentration of cows on the inside. Roof overhangs, we got to make sure that we put those in accordingly because the 6-year-old barns have stalls on the outside that could get blowing rain, a little bit of sun going into it, but you got to be careful with that part, and you just got to make sure you have enough roof on the outside of that. And then intermediate building columns, which for the most part in Australia don't happen. So this again is a building with an open ridge on it and this overhang. So this has got overhangs here. This is the sidewall overhang to protect these outside freestalls. This is one of those truss frame buildings in Australia with an open ridge. This open ridge, you can see, it's got a direct shot of light going across these cows right in here. Sometimes it can potentially create a problem. And lately we've gone back through here and put ridge caps on these buildings to try to, that does two things. It keeps a little bit of drift of rain out of there, and it also stops the sun from beating on these cows' faces. Some guys find it a problem, some people don't. This is a sun angle in Australia in an east-west oriented barn like it's supposed to be. This right here is summer, right in the middle of December. So this is going to be 8 o'clock or in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll be at noon. It's a very, very tight shade. So that shade never moves off the edge of this barn to come into it. This right here is going to be, this angle right here is going to be 8 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock PM in March, so or September. So it'll be fall and spring. A little bit of sun will come in here early in the morning, late in the afternoon. And then followed by winter time, you'll get a little bit more sun in, but it doesn't really matter at that point because it's cooler. We do these shade studies on every building that we do just to make sure that we've got this correct right in here. So, but that's something that you need to consider as you put these buildings up. I'll go through some of the tunnel barns. There's not very many right now in Australia. Quentin's got most of them, so it's something we can look at. The tunnel barns are a bit different because these barns are closer together. These are only 6 meters apart. This happens to be a naturally ventilated barn in the middle of it, but that's a tunnel barn. These are all tunnel barns. You can see all the fans at the end walls of these buildings here. This is a complete tunnel barn facility. This is in China. So barns are lower. The eave height is the roof slope is lower. This is not an open ridge. It's just a ridge light. It's just a clear cap on it to let sun in with fans on the end. Again, the tunnel barn is going to let air in one end and back out the other. For the most part, these are going to be pretty expensive in the U.S. and in my part of the world, in the southeastern U.S. You know, we're talking about anywhere from 130 to 200% cost of a naturally ventilated barn. They could be because of insulation, because of walls, because of 110 different things. Why would anybody do this? This is North Florida Holsteins in northern Florida. This is a high pressure misting system that's inside this building. This building is at 1,000 cow barns, 2 500 cow groups, average 54 liters of milk per cow. That's 54,000 liters a day coming out of this building. So this is not a 35 liter herd. This is all his fresh cows. This is a 6,000 cow dairy, but it's all, he's got fresh cows in here. He's got the 1/6 of his herd in this building, but this is where all of his high producing animals are. And he's got very expensive cooling system in there in order to combat that. So are there situations for tunnel ventilated buildings? Yeah. But I mean, it's something that you can take a look at. Again, these barns are a little bit closer together, and instead of 30 meters or 25 meters apart, they're only 6. So that's freestall barns. That's tunnel ventilated barns. Those two different types of freestalls. This with a covered feed face was basically just a covered feed pad. And the only point that I wanted to make here, if this is a feed pad, you guys all know how to build these things and how to lay them out. The big thing about these feed pads, if you're gonna put a barn over them in the future, or maybe you're gonna cover them first, just keep in mind that that you could put a freestall barn on top of here. I've seen a lot of guys in Australia that are putting these feed pads in north and south. And when you try to cover this thing and put a barn on top of that, it's oriented wrong. So now you're gonna have shade that's going to come in. It's going to be some really funky things that are going to happen inside there. Not insurmountable, but if you're thinking about putting a freestall later on, you need to be thinking about how to put these feed pads in here. If you're going to cover a feed pad, you need to make sure that you got something in here for future buildings. This is a future 4-row, future 6-row with a covered feed pad. This is my little don't paint yourself into a corner thingy. These are two that we did here in Florida and in the southeastern U.S. You can see that they're high roof heights on them, mainly because we're thinking about we're trying to accommodate future freestalls at a later date. This guy here never built the freestalls onto it. We did this about 10 years ago. This guy was done about the same time, and then 3 years later, he ended up putting freestalls on the outside. So right now, if you go to this barn, it's got a 6-row freestall barn. Bedded compost pack housing barns that we've been looking at. One thing that I've heard a lot about in Australia is that there's a generic term of compost barn inside in Australia with a lot of guys talking about it. A compost barn and a bedded pack barn are two different things. A true compost barn is an aerobic system. So this bed right here, this aerobic bed is raked and cultivated twice a day. This bedded pack, this anaerobic pack right here is just basically bedding and manure, and that's cleaned out twice a year, 3 times a year, depending on how much you can do it. It's just a completely different system. And so be careful on when you're talking about the two systems. If you're looking at a compost barn, this document here from University of Kentucky is as good as anything that's out there. And it's got a lot of good information on how to put these barns in there, about what to do on the inside, bedding types, management, maintenance, everything else that's in there. It's a good document. Jeff Bewley is one of the guys who put this up. This will be right here. You'll have access to this, this photograph, and you can go onto their website and download this document. So the compost barns are indeed, they're going to be tilled, or they're going to be chisel plowed multiple times a day, every day, in order to get this thing to work out right. But you're basically making compost. One of the things about this compost document was that it was specifically called out wood sawdust. You could use wood shavings as well, but it's not quite as good. They've had guys go out there and try to do these buildings with something else. This is sugarcane bagasse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but after you crush sugarcane, you've got this stuff left over. They tried to use this as compost, and it was horrible. This is in Vietnam. This is a well-designed barn that had the right configuration, but it's got twice as many cows in it. My buddy Dennis Armstrong is fond of saying, I says, you can learn a lot by watching cows. If you look at these cows in here, one of the things that you notice is that there's a huge proportion of these animals that are all standing up. So in the middle of the day, you get this, supposed to have this comfortable bed, and why the hell aren't they lying down? There's something wrong with a system like this. If you look at this, there's something wrong with it. I tried walking across this barn right here. It was horrible. This right here is just a matter of being overstocked. And you can overstock a freestall barn. You cannot overstock a bedded pack barn or a compost barn. These are just examples of guys who screwed up and didn't do things right. One of the big things here is that in a larger pack barn, whether it be compost or pack barn, you take more fans. So there would have to be at least 2, if not 3 fans across this pack in order to ventilate this barn right. And you can see what the cows are doing. They're all standing up right in the middle of the fans. I'm not going to go into this. This is compost size, minimum pack size based on milk production. A lot of guys are they're going to be in the 10, 12, 14 square meters per cow inside these packs. If you want to get into that, you can. All right, we can talk about it at some point. These are bedding volume calculations. And again, I don't want to get into that, only from the standpoint, and we'll go over in a second with free stalls, is that there's a huge amount of bedding, and Dean found this out, that is required to start up a barn. You got a barn, you finished it, you paid the contractor, now you're gonna put cows in it. You got a snotload of bedding to put in here. 300 cow group, that's almost 1,000 in a bedded pack building. That's almost a 1,000 cubic meters of bedding just to start the barn, no cows in it. And then you got to put bedding on top of that in order to get it to operate. So it's a situation where you got to be careful about how much bedding, to be aware of how much bedding goes into these barns, no matter what type of system that you have. Again, this is too dense to go into right now, but it's on the sheet. How we doing time-wise, Mikey? So freestall management considerations, I wanted to throw a few of these things up there. Again, this is a kind of a dense thing. It's the main thing is this is in a sand bedded freestall barn. Just wanted to go through there in a 300 bed facility with empty beds like this barn was, that this photograph that I'm showing right now. There's a 300 beds that need sand. That's 400 tons of sand just to put the initial sand load into one half of this barn. It's a 600 cow barn, 300. So that'd be 800 tons of sand to go into the building before you put a cow in there. And in a barn where you're recycling sand, and let's give it 30 days of recycle down into here, that's an additional 200 tons of sand you have to have available per side. So that's 400, 200, is 600 tons of sand. If you have a 600 cow barn, that's 1,200 tons of sand that you'd have to have on hand in the facility, ready to go before you have cows in the barn. It's something to keep in mind as you start looking at these facilities. We like to say sand is king because sand's the gold standard. It's not the only bedding. We use it because a lot of guys like it because it's pretty forgiving from a moisture standpoint. It's hard to deal with, and it plays havoc on your manure system. But a lot of guys do use it. Green bedding is what Dean has in his new facility here. Can work quite well. The new barns over at Kumbuna, or now everything at Kumbuna is in green freestalls now, which is or green bedding in the freestalls. If managed correctly, it can be decent. It can be a very good bedding source. We've seen it, around the world that this can work pretty well. You got to make it first. So you got to have the bedding that's in here, enough bedding. Again, as I mentioned in those last few slides, you got to have enough bedding to put into the freestalls, to put cows in there to produce the manure in order to get stuff in there. And if you're going to continue to put bedding in these barns, you have to have additional bedding in order to make this up, in order to make this happen. So this system here, this is Dean's system here, where you have a pit that pumps over a screen separator. Solids fall down, which is going to go into this conveyor and then put into these bays here, and then that's where this bedding is being made. Water goes into another pit and going into a few waste storage ponds. So we've done a number of these if the climate is right. The more humid you are, the more, if you get closer to the coast, different places like that, this becomes interesting. Because this bedding is hard to keep dry. This is a standard freestall cross section. We've done for adult cows. We've done a boatload of these. It's my whole adage about not reinventing the wheel. There's some proper ways of doing this. We've got some good details out there. Mike's got good details of stuff that they prepared and they used. So don't get out there and start thinking that you're just going to get on the internet and figure out what's going on. They've got some good data that we can provide out there to do it right. You can screw up freestalls pretty well. These girls didn't read the instructions on their stalls. These are green freestalls that we had here in Florida that weren't installed properly. So that really made a mess till they got them installed correctly. But cows didn't understand how to use them. I've got a beef against freestall mattresses, and there's some people who like them, and I that's surely something that you can consider if so. But boy, I'm really, if you're going to do a freestall barn, I'd surely encourage you to stay the heck away from them. This is a total bias on my part, but once you start going into facilities and you look at cows with lesions like this, and you just want to go up and slap somebody, biggest promoters that I've seen in freestall mattresses happen to sell them. It's a matter of just trying to make sure that you're getting cows comfortable. If this thing had 50 millimeters of bedding on top of it, this would be a different facility, or 100. But the problem is how do you keep it on there? So if you get 50 or 75 or 100 mil of bedding on there, and the cows can lay on bedding, that's great. But then they kick it all out, and then you got to put stuff back in there. It's a management issue as much as anything else. This is a slide of a facility that we redid in Qatar. We took the mattresses out, pulled out the concrete, put sand bedding in here. This is the first day the cows got on the freestalls. Every cow in the group went into the freestall beds, and not a single one of them were on the mattress. So again, this mattress has no bedding on it. So that's the part that people are going to say that's the main reason that they didn't work, which is potentially true. Biggest thing, if you guys don't have barns now, you don't have this equipment. This is the kind of stuff that you can do that's gonna save you a lot of time, and it ain't cheap. So all of these things, all these pieces of equipment in here, they tie up a tractor, and they're expensive to purchase. But it's one of the things is if you've got 300 or 400 or 1,000 freestalls, you can't do it by hand. You have to do it with some piece of equipment. And so it's just one more thing. It's just the mechanization. That's what I've called mechanization in the dairy. You got to have that in order to get a freestall and to make this work. And if you're worried about equipment, you're worried about the cost of it, then it's probably good that you don't mess with these barns. This rakes that are coming up, Dean and I were talking about these rakes a while ago, different types of them that are out there. This happens to be sand beds. But going through there with a piece of equipment and being able to groom these beds is a big deal. A lot of guys go back and forth about whether they need to groom the beds or not, but especially if you're using green bedding, it's nice to be able to kick the stuff around a little bit and help dry it out. Same thing with sand. You'll get it to try to get it dried out as best you can. Pushing up feed, sweeping floors. I just showed this because it's fun. This is an automatic broom in China. I don't know why they did it, but it seemed to be interesting. So mechanization for sure. Water troughs, the way that we lay things out and making sure that we got enough water in all these facilities. We're talking about in the neighborhood of 10 centimeters per cow, 200 cows would be 20 meters. We try to get as much water as we can. These tipping water troughs are kind of interesting so that they can clean these crossovers, which is good. But they're also, you don't have to get up there with a brush quite as often because you can dump the water trough, clean the crossover, and then keep the water fresh. So there's a lot of good things about them. Rubber mats is something that we've used quite a bit in other places. This strip of rubber right here, which is interesting watching these cows walk on there. I took this photograph at Moxie Farms in Gulakon in about 1998, 99, something like that. So this has been, there's nothing new under the sun with trying to get cows a little bit comfortable. But think about these cows are telling us something. Again, going back to Armstrong's edict about watch the cows. This is a feed face rubber strip right here. Same thing in here. These are grooved rubber so that they're good and they keep a cow's feet at a point where they can without slipping. These are installation priorities. I'm not going to go into right now. Main thing about these rubber mats is steel blades on pieces of equipment are a big no-no. The second thing is that you get some guys with skid steers that start hot dogging these pieces of equipment on these rubber mats, and they'll tear them off the floor. So things to consider once you start putting these rubber mats on floors. We're almost finished. We're getting so this is a grooving floors. There's wet groove, dry groove. There's more art than science sometimes in these wet groove. And you got to understand and know what you're doing in order to do this right. If you do it right, these are really good fours. And you can tell the guy who's doing this knows what the heck he's doing. This is a machine groove type system. These grooves also look pretty good. But if you don't do this right, you can make a mess. And that's what these are right here. This is just unbelievable. These are tearing the feet off of cows. So it's a definite problem in some facilities, and you just got to be careful. You got to get the right contractor involved before you can, in order to do this right. All right, so that was 30 years of experience in 45 minutes.
Well, that's wonderful, Jake. Thank you very much for that. There's questions firing in left, right, and centre here. But I guess my first question, we've got Dehne Vinnicombe on the line there, and I just thought one of the things that a lot of people will know is just that process, Dehne, and like you've just been through it with Jake on that planning side, and I guess from start to finish, a bit of a picture on what were the big eureka moments in that process.
Yeah, well, the reason we went down the path we went, we're Northern Victorian farmers and stuff like that, and our climate is changing. We had feed pads for cows. The wastage of feed that we're getting off these pads was just astronomical. I reckon we're losing about 25 to 30% of our feed. So that was a bit of a problem. So we mucked around a little bit ourselves, seeing what we thought we could do, and then Jake was coming out, so we made contact with him and spoke to Quinton, and Quinton Moxey's been nothing but tremendous to him, and his team of people have been really good to us. But the biggest thing there is we just thought, we were 450 cows, we were doing pretty well, and we only need to build one shed. But as Jake explains, it's not just about that, it's about where you can go and what you can do and all those kind of things. And, it's spreading your cost. As Jake was just saying before, it's the bloody sand thrower, it's $100,000, and it's a scraper, and it's this, and it's all those kind of things. So it's there's lots of add-on cost and all that kind of stuff. But it was just knowing where we were going. So we thought we'd go to a compost barn first because it was cheaper and we could just house it easier and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is you've got to run that barn the opposite way to what we want to run our other barn and stuff like that. So then we just thought, well, if we're going to do it, we were lucky enough that we could do the whole lot in one hit. So that's exactly what we did, and change one management practice from one to the other rather than going a long way around it, kind of a thing. So look, I went over to America and went with Jake for a couple of days around there and did some homework. The reason we used the green manure system, somewhere along the line, we've got to clean that solids out of our pond and stuff like that. And I'm not big on sand in manure pumps and stuff like that. It just destroys. It's just like sandblasting. We have to get our sand from 100 k's from here, so it was an extra expense. So if we could take out 30 to 40% of the solids before it hit that dam, we believe that it was probably catching 80% of our problems into the first dam, kind of a thing, which we can use as a beautiful liquid product going back out in our paddocks.
And there's been a few questions just in regards, and you both touched on it, so I'll let you jump around. But just on the manure management in these intensive systems, I guess what are the rules? There's lots of things that are out there. You can mechanise it, or you can simplify it. And I guess what are the advantages and disadvantages to those types of systems?
You go, Dehne.
Well, when it goes to shit, it does go to, sorry, Jake. When it goes to shit, it does go to shit. And we've had it go to shit, so it's all good. So we won't lie there. But as Jake said, it's, we need 3 cubic meters per stall. It's about having enough product. We went through this winter. We had no foot rot. We had no feet problems there, but we did have a fair few cows with mastitis. It's just that our stalls weren't full enough. We were actually letting the cows outside. And it was quite funny. The gates were open. By 10 o'clock, all the cows were coming back inside anyway and stuff like that. But our beds weren't full enough, and we knew we were going to have these problems when we first went into it. We were hoping we were going to get through it, and we're set up now for the summer and stuff like that. So So yeah, that's one of the problems we had. I won't lie about that, but yeah, we're on top of it now, and we know what we need, and we're trying to put some dry product outside so we can bring that back in next year and stuff like that. But I believe once our beds are chockers and full and maintained properly, we probably won't need that dry product to come back in. But if we've got a reserve of dry product, and we ended up putting sawdust in there just to build our packs up a bit and just dry them out, and it worked exceptionally well. Sorry, Jake, go for it, mate.
No, you're good. I think from a manure management standpoint, we have a tendency to go out and look at what the ultimate the ultimate location of the manure is going to be. So right now, pasture operations, cows are putting manure out for the most part, at least the vast majority of it. So once you put cows in barns, then you got to get rid of it. How do you get rid of it? So if you've got enough land close by to your facility, one of the easiest things to do is pump. So you can pump go through a screen separator, get some solids out, and then you can just pump it to an irrigation system. You can pump it to a flood irrigation system. You can just pump it. Doing it's convenient, and it's very efficient to do. And so if I was going to try to do that, and a nutrient management plan allowed me to, with all the land close by, then a liquid system makes a lot of sense. Flush everything. Dean's flushing. You just flush it all out. You keep everything in a liquid. Take the solids that you need to, and then you have to be able to handle. And the most of the nutrients are in liquids. If you're in a situation where you're limited land-wise, and then you have to go far in order to put out more nutrients, then you don't need to be adding so much water. So then you got to start looking at how do we keep it in a solid form, and then that's where a scrape system will come in. So a lot of the facilities that we do in cold climates, most of those are going to be a scrape system, partially because the stupid flush system freezes up in the wintertime. You have an ice skating rink in the barn, but part of it is because everything is, you can keep it as a solid, you can store it in a smaller place because you got to store it for longer periods of time. And then if you have to haul it, you're not hauling water, you're hauling solids, 10 Ks down the road. So it makes a difference. So when we do that calculus, that's what we're doing. What's the ultimate location of a manure nutrients? If it's close by and you can keep most of it close by, liquid systems seem to work. If you got to go farther and farther and farther away, it gets harder. Now we pump pretty far. Far means 3 or 4 kilometers. Right. So once you start getting too far beyond that point, 5 kilometers, you just get too far beyond that, your pumping costs are too high because you're paying to try to get friction losses in the pipe. So that's how we do it. That's the kind of, and every farm's a little bit different, but
we're getting a few questions just in regards to bedding. Now, Dean, you went for deep bedding manure solids. Was there any thought about another form in that? I guess it's just that, like you talked about mattresses there before, and the possibility to be able to dress your mattress with a manure bedded solid material for bedding. But you've gone deep bedding. Can you just explain, I guess, why you went that way and the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I suppose I was lucky enough when I was 20. That was my school education. I went over the seas for 12 months. I went to America, Canada, Italy, France, England, and I came home and I said to Dad, I said, we can't house cows like that on mattresses. As Jake pointed out, the lesions and the swelling of hock and stuff like that. It was I thought was pretty cruel and stuff like that. And if we're going to go down this track of deep bedding, it's just cow comfort. 60% of the weight's on the cow's front knees when she drops to the ground. So she needs something there to hit that's got some forgiveness in it. And if she goes and hits, mats that have got an inch of bloody forgiveness, and these cows are getting bigger. Like, our cows were 600 kilos to 650 kilos. They're selling them as choppers kind of a thing. Now they're 720 to 740 kilos, and I'll probably get up to 800 kilos. So, you got an 800 kilo cow smashing her knees down on the front there. It's they need some forgiveness, I believe, and that's why we went down that pack. So it was either sand or the green manure, which we're going to use. But that green manure system, it cost us $1 million. We won't lie about that. It was expensive, but also had some good conversations, and I know what some dams have cost to bloody empty out, and it's near the same money. So it doesn't matter. You're going to have to pay to get rid of that solid somewhere. So you either pay for it up front and reuse it, or you put it into a dam and you pay for it to get rid of it then.
Brilliant. And I guess just on that bedding, you touched on it, but just how are your bedding management? Like, how often are you bedding? How often are you raking? And I guess the question is sort of on the manure bedded solids, but also on sand as well. What's our optimum? You sort of touched on that in your presentation, Jake. But practically, Dean, how's it working for you?
Yeah, no, it's good. So we rake twice a day. We're talking to Jake about that. So we're raking twice a day with an actual, like a sand rake. So it's got little spikes that are probably 4 inches deep, I suppose. And it's just going along, tickling the top up, just aerating it. If we've left any manure in there, just blending that manure in with the green manure kind of a thing. Just trying to dry it out so our fans don't stop. So our fans get down to 30%. So they're variable speed fans.
Oops.
Yeah, so we're just trying to dry that product out, or we don't rake on a day that we're filling the beds up. We'll rake that night, so we generally fill them up in the morning. So we've had one extra staff member come on just for the sheds in the morning. So we still have 2 in the shed, and then the guy will go and bring the rest of the cows in, muck out any wet manure that's in the beds, kind of a thing, with a rake, and then he'll go and either rake or fill up, kind of a thing.
Are you're adding bedding every day, Dean?
No, it's about every second or third day at the moment, just to make enough bedding stuff, because we haven't got an oversupply, and it's just, that's what it's taking. So with the green manure, what we're trying to do is heat it up to 60 degrees over the 3 to 4 days, and then that kills all your pathogens, and then after you've done that, we can bed it back down again. So it's about every second or third day.
They've got so Mike, and along those lines, is that so the guys who are doing sand, for the most part in the freestalls, they're talking like twice a week. And so, and I've heard guys who are similar situations to Dean's, is that they'll, with the manure solids and with the green solids, is they're trying to go a smaller amount more often as opposed to a larger amount less often. And the sand's going to be, it's going to wick, it's already dry, and so you don't have to put it out quite so often. It dries pretty quick, even if it's damp. Whereas a manure solids takes a little bit of time to dry up. So with a lighter amount like Dean's putting on right now, that I've heard many guys who are using his same management style to do that.
And as Jake said earlier on too, you probably need to build that manure shed first, just to build that product up. You know, especially out here, like if you started building product up in the wintertime and then you could bake it in the summertime just to dry it right out, you've got a nice dry pack ready to go. Whereas, you know, we were taking whatever we could get, kind of a thing. And then, as you said, we weren't using our shed properly because we were using it as a feed pad and then letting the cows go outside. And then you got cows sitting on bloody dirt. And, you know, it gets interesting. But, you know, we definitely change a few things first. But if we could put the manure from the dairy down first, that would save us a lot of troubles.
And just the sheer volumes, Dean, you obviously did a fair bit of planning with Jake on that manure side and that manure management side. Do you think, I guess, was that preparation, were you comfortable with that at the start, or was it, how did you get your head around it, and how have you seen it practically now, that when you had to get your head around it to start off with and what it looks like now, is it what you expected it to be?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, with good planning and good management, you go through these things. We went and had a look at farms over there and stuff like that. And you know, we had some good conversations with Quinton. And, you know, as I said, I thought I was pretty good building my first shed and one shed only kind of a thing. And he said, well, shit, you know, don't do that. Like when they went to Coolagong, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but he said they were milking 2,000 cows, and that's probably where he thought he was going to go. And, you know, they've probably got 10,000 cows equivalent down there now, kind of a thing. So, you don't think that that's how big you're going to get, but his explanation of, you know, your last shed's your cheapest shed, because on this first shed we built $1 million worth of manure management and all that kind of stuff. The second shed we're going to build, so, you know, we got 3 stages in ours. So the second shed we'll build another shed plus a milking parlour, but then the third shed we only got to build a shed, kind of a thing. So it's, And and then you can build more sheds after that, and it's just so cheap because it's just a bloody shed. And you don't go and buy a tractor and then 3 years down the track you go and buy a smaller tractor kind of a thing. And that's what he was kind of saying. It's just, you're always getting bigger, and you got these protocols, you got these managements, and it's just a dilution of cost. It's not a problem at all. So it's and it just becomes easier to manage because you probably got a bit more staff, and that's what we do find in this. Like, I've been quoted to say it makes you a lazy farmer, but I don't mean it in that way. But the lazy farmer is you don't have to worry about where the cows are going. You don't have to worry about what paddocks you're watering and all those kind of things. It's X amount of silage in the pit, and that's fed every day, and that doesn't change. So, and you can train people up a lot easier in these places because that guy's feeding cows and that's all he does, and the guy's raking the beds and all those kind of things, that's all he does. And then you've got accountability because you can kick his ass if it's not right, or you can pat him on the back if it is right, kind of a thing. But whereas before that, we needed a jack of everything. We needed a guy to go and shift a tape down the paddock, and we needed him to give him enough feed, and we needed him to think whether it was wet enough, but then he needed to know if the electric fences were going and all those other things. It's just not opening gates and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where it does become a lot easier and stuff like that. And just cow management, like, it's just unbelievable. Like, with the extra shed we've got for calving cows down and stuff like that. But, then the cows are fully going before they go into the main herd and stuff like that as well. And it's very easy.
And Dean, just on, that's a great answer. Just on on that design side, you've obviously got expertise and you've talked to a lot of farmers, but I guess, was there a core, or do you need to drag these people in when you start this, or who are the people you need to drag in when you start this conversation?
Look, I think you got to go out there and you got to find what you want first. Like, and as Jake said, you got to find your management. If it's a compost barn that you want, well, that's what you want. But don't try and build something that you think you're going to change, because one bloke said, you can build a shed, but you can't change the direction the shed is once the shed's down, kind of a thing. So, that's a pretty common thing. So you got to have a rough idea of what you want to do, how it's going to work, and then you go to the people that you need to go to. And look, I wouldn't recommend anyone else but Jake, but I might be a bit biased, and he's not a bad bloke, despite what other people say. But that's his job. Like, and it's like a nutritionist. You don't get a nutritionist to build your bloody house because he doesn't know how to do that. So Jake's built these all over the world, and you couldn't do it without that experience. And we've had some banter, and we've said, well, can we do this, can we do that? And Jake's learning as well all the time too. We're not saying that at all, but it's that experience. He's been all around the world to put it together. And my theories was, well, if Moxie Farms, who's the biggest freestall farms in the country, are using him, and you couldn't just go get a builder to build what we've built and say, well, this is, it's the shed's 36 meters wide and it's 200 meters long and it's pretty simple. It's a bit more intense than that.
You did call me names a few times.
I still call you names.
I think I got a few names too, Jake.
Right.
Now we've had sorry, Jake, you were going to add in on that?
Yeah, so you guys are building, because the fortunate guys coming back right now and looking at buildings. As I mentioned this a while ago, Dean didn't have this. What some of these guys are going to have, and then there's Dean, and there's Jay Kleiman, and there's Nathan Shannon, and with the Kabuna things with Moxie. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. There wasn't a lot to see, and I think as stuff goes along, and as everybody's learning. So I'm still learning, but then Dean's learning, and then Jay's learning, and everybody's learning all these different things. You guys are learning, Mike, and so I think that you guys right now, Australia is a cow culture, but what you don't have is barns. But so you guys are making it's amazing and how quickly this is changing, because you're a bunch of smart people there, and you're figuring this part out that, well, we know how to graze cows and we know how to milk cows, with how do you house them? And so I think that you guys are growing it right now. And so it's just going to be a matter of time where there's going to be more and more people that are going to have a lot more knowledge and experience to be able to help one another. I know the bankers and folks like that, they've been even borrowing money from folks. I mean, some of these guys are a little concerned about, gosh, how do I know? How are we going to get our money back? How are you going to get your money back? And then now people like Dehne and Kaboon and other guys are actually showing that, yeah, we can put cows in barns and we can make a difference. And so then, we have a base that we can work from to say that, we can say comfortably that you change over from this system to that system, you can pay for it. So, right, you guys are growing it internally.
There's a little pat on the back for Australia. Thanks, Jake.
There you go.
We've just had an answer, or had a question there from New Zealand. We're talking Invercargill, where we're getting -8, -6 degrees in the winter and quite a wet. And we're talking about green bedded manure or sand bedding, and just what, I guess, the differences in your bedding style when you do get to a climate like that. I guess we're blessed in this part of the world. You can get the most humid places on earth, and you can get pretty cold and wet and horrible too. So can you comment on that, on deciding bedding and that arrangement?
We did some facilities up in China and getting into various parts of China, and some of them we've seen, didn't design, but we saw. Man, we were in a -25, -30 degrees. I don't know if anybody will live there, but it was stinking cold. If the sand was dry enough, it would actually continue to work. If things got wet, it froze like that. And so anything that has moisture in it is a problem at the colder temperature. And that is, -7 is not -27, but it's still, I think the cows themselves, depending on the type of barn that you have, and maybe you have to get to a point where you close in the sidewalls with curtains or something like that to retain a little bit of heat, still get ventilation, but retain a little bit of heat where maybe it's not going to be -7, maybe it'll be 0. Cow body temperature is going to hang on to that bedding without a problem. As long as the barns are stocked correctly, the cows are going to be, we're trying to get cows laying 12 to 14 hours on a day. So these cows are continuing to be lying down on beds. So as long as they're laying down on the beds, as long as the barn and air's not whipping through a building and creating some issues, and I don't think that's going to be an issue.
So we can beat that for when the summer comes around. It's 32 or 5 degrees. Compared to when it's -6 and the rain's driving in sideways. We just need to be able to pull those sides down to be able to keep the moisture out of the.
Yeah, right.
We're not talking about a dry cold. This is a wet cold.
So throughout, if you look at facilities in the States, and as you crawl up the states and the latitudes, there's no curtains down here, and where I'm at, we start peeing and moaning when it gets down to 4. But as temperatures start getting colder and colder, you get higher and higher in the U.S. Guys will start putting curtains on barns, and the main thing is trying to keep a cow out of the wind and dry, both. And so if you got a cow and it's cold, she can handle the cold. What she can't handle is when if she's wet and it's windy, she can't handle that. And so she's going to take so much energy in order to try to warm herself up. She's robbing nutrients out of the milk because she's trying to keep it just to keep herself warm. But if you have a curtain up there, and I've been in barns, I've crawled all over barns up in Indiana and into Illinois and Wisconsin and Minnesota. You get up into those colder climates up in the U.S., much colder than what you're talking about there. It's keeping the cows out of the wind and keeping them dry.
Terrific. Well, I think we've gone on a 20-minute extra, and there's other questions being answered. I guess what we've found is this is as Jake said, it's a bit of a start of a conversation, a bit of a base with farmers like Dehne that are going into these systems and learning through this. And there's a real, and I say it all the time, there's a real a sharing nature, Dean, you'd say, with guys that are going into these house systems, and because everyone wants to see each other succeed. Would that be a correct statement?
Oh, without a doubt, and Quinton's pretty obvious. If they made mistakes over there, they'd say, look, we've done this wrong, let's not do this. And but the rule is if we do something wrong, to let someone else know too. And, yeah, we have made a couple of mistakes and we're not going to deny that at all. It's just a matter of saying, well, look, we've done this wrong, we've done that wrong. If I was to do it again, I wouldn't do this or that. But apart from that, everyone else has been pretty good. So, yeah, and look, we've been pretty honest and open, and we've had a lot of people come through and have a look at these facilities and stuff like that. So it's, and we're probably lucky in the dairy industry. And my theory is we've opened up to other people because other people have opened up to us. So it's only fair. Like, it's, we've all got to start somewhere, and you all got to look and kick and do whatever you got to do. So if we can help others out as others have helped us out, it's only respect, I think.
That's wonderful. And one final question before we all finish up. Great debate. Compost, freestall. It's a one-word answer if you can do it in that.
Ford, Chevy. Ford, Chevy.
That just seems to be the great.
We're not disappointed for the way we've gone down. So we're more than happy. And the one thing I would say is look at your cost of infrastructure per cow, because everyone says, a compost shed is much cheaper, but then all of a sudden, the shed I've got down there, it's a 720 cow shed. We'd only put 450 cows on it if it was a compost shed. And the fans and the sparkies and all that kind of stuff is still the same. So that's one thing that I would say. Your management systems on these freestalls, it doesn't change from day to day. Like, it's pretty consistent. Once we've got the product right and all that kind of stuff, we're just filling beds and scraping it. Whereas you go to a compost shed in the wintertime when it is getting too wet and all those kind of stuff, we have to bring product in there and more wood shavings and stuff like that just to dry it all out and stuff like that. So it's going back to the farmer's situation where we need our workers to think, if we're not here, to say, are we putting more wood in there? Are we doing this and all those kind of things? So we're making people think again, whereas in the freestalls, they don't have to think because it doesn't change.
So one of the things I will mention about that, Mike, is that as you get going through what I mentioned earlier about manure management, is that when you start looking at liquid versus a solid system, if you've in a situation where you're really limited with land close by or with neighbors close by, and you have to handle as much nutrients as you possibly can in a solid form, compost seems to make sense, because all the manure that goes on in these packs are in a solid form, and you just haul all this material out. You're talking about tens of thousands of cubic meters of material a year that you got to haul into the barn and haul out. But the difference is that if from a nutrient standpoint, if you've got to get this material off your farm, then it makes sense to put it into a solid form, and you haul it off with vehicles and tractors and whatever else, and then you deal with a smaller amount of material in liquid. But if you've got land close by, and Dean has land close by, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and put it in a liquid form and just get it out onto your fields that way. You got one guy that can do that. You got one guy that can turn on a stinking pump and pump nutrients out on fields, as opposed to tractor guys and loaders and trucks and driving down the road and putting all these things in there. That's a pretty big operation, but it's only done periodically.
And on that too, do you think there's any cow? For question for you both, do you think there's any in cow comfort? We often talk about cow comfort on that side.
I think if there was more of a difference in cow comfort, more guys would do it. The best dairymen I know that are putting out the highest amount of milk, this Norfolk Holsteins, 54 liters of milk a day per cow. If he thought that compost bedded pack was more comfortable for his cows, I guarantee you he'd do it. That's an engineered way of talking about
What about from the farmer side, Dean?
Yeah, no, look, well, as Jake's photos show, like those cows, they pick where they want to sit and they know if they're comfortable or not. So it's as simple as that. So it's you've just got to design the system that you think you want to work, and it comes back down to management too. Like if you don't think that you want the sand thrower and all those kind of things, then you don't go down that path. Like if you haven't got a handyman that can fix all that kind of stuff, it's just be careful where you're going.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Everyone's held on and listened to what we've got to say and what you guys have got to say. We really enjoy your input and what you're doing for our industry. And I guess to people that are online, we've talked a lot about, about manure management in this. There is other aspects to obviously housing animals, and we can pull out different subjects to talk about. So if there's other things that people want to hear about or want to chew away at, we're more than happy to put together a conversation around that and really base and get down and dirty with those certain aspects. So thank you, Jake. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Good deal. Take care. Dino, good to see you, buddy.
No worries. Thanks, man.